Good evening, everyone. My name is Frank Fenimore. I'm the Executive Director of the Cleveland and Woodley Park Village. Cleveland and Woodley Park Village is one of 13 villages in the District of Columbia, and we work collaboratively through an organization that we've created called the DC Villages Collaborative. We have 103 registrants tonight, so many people may be from around the city. Perhaps you're not affiliated with any organization yet, any village yet. You can always find which village is your home village at dcvillages.org. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started tonight on our presentation on medical alert devices. And so I want to let you know that this will be recorded, and we will post this recording to our blog on our website, which is cwpv.org. And you just scroll down on the homepage and you will see it. Everyone is muted, and I ask you to please stay muted, and that's just so that someone's phone ringing or a television or something doesn't capture the spotlight and distract the presentation. So if you have questions during the session for our presenter, I'd ask you to please use the chat function, and you can enter your questions or comments in the chat, and our presenter, Richard Caro, will be following the chat. He may not answer your question immediately, but he's really great. I've worked with him before about following those questions and eventually getting to them. Um, uh, and at the very end, I can tell you that if there's time, we will open it up, and so people could then possibly be on camera if you wish to do so. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Dr. Richard Caro, who has a public benefit company called Tech Enhanced Life, and they have presented to us several times, as well as with the Foggy Bottom West End Village. And they have a group of people, which Dr. Caro would talk to us about, called the Longevity Explorers, which was really captivating to me when I was first introduced to him, where a group of older adults actually review products. And so they're really potential users looking at the products that they're reviewing. And so to me, that lends a lot of credibility, and why I particularly wanted Dr. Caro to be able to present to us. So with that, I will turn this over to Dr. Richard Caro, and he can start off the presentation and perhaps tell us a little bit more about himself. And Dr. Caro.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Frank. Let me just share my screen here and then we'll get started. Okay. Well, first of all, thanks very much for coming, everybody. I'm in San Francisco. I'm not sure you all realize that, but it's always, I think the fun thing about Zoom and the post-COVID era is we've all learned how to have these cross-country conversations. I am going to start with a presentation on the topic you can see on the screen right now, which is calling for help, medical alerts and other solutions. And you're very, very welcome to put questions in the chat. I think the more interactive it is, the better. And at the end, you're welcome to ask, questions out loud if you want to. I encourage you to try and put your questions in the chat as we're going along, because sometimes they get lost if we wait till the end. Okay. What we're going to talk about today is a couple of different areas. First of all, if you think about it, people always ask about medical alerts, which are a type of product, but really the problem we're trying to solve is calling for help in specific situations. And there are some interesting emerging trends beyond what you might call a medical alert that I'm going to touch on a bit. And then we'll talk about medical alerts and if one's interested in having one, how you'd approach finding the right one. And before I go on, I just want to give a little plug because this talk is going to be based on an updated version of one that I gave a year or two ago as part of our seminar series. You can see the titles of this seminar series here on the screen. I like to think that it captures a decade's worth of learning of older adults and technology and what's relevant. And those talks are all video recorded on the Tech Enhance Life website. They're a year or two out of date now, but they're still pretty current. So anyway, if you end up thinking today was useful, you might want to browse and find some of these other ones too. Okay, let's talk about calling for help. So just to kind of have everyone on the same page, this is really the situation people worry about, where somebody falls and can't get up, or has a heart attack, or a stroke, or any one of a number of things that mean they're having an emergency and they would like some help. And if they do it with, you know, their spouse nearby, maybe that's okay, but often they're alone. So that's the fundamental essence of the problem. The challenge is that there's kind of a bewildering array of different products all claiming to solve this situation. And we first started to look at this a long time ago now. I think it might have been 2016, because we were giving some talks at one of the villages in California, and they said, you know, how do we decide what to buy? And if you read the marketing material, you know, they all say they're all great, but they're all very different. And so we bought 50 of them and tried them all out and tried to make sense of it all. And that was kind of a popular study. And so ever since, we've tried to keep that, you know, the body of work updated. So to sort of put all that in context, we've been looking at this on and off since 2016. We refreshed the content most recently a few months ago. And so I'm going to try and give you the perspective of all that right now. I think the most important takeaway is that there's no such thing as a best medical alert or a best solution to this problem, even though if you look on the internet, it will all be about the best this and the best that, because that's the way that they get you to click on it. And then, you know, these are all advertising driven models. So there's no such thing as a best something, but what there is a best version for a specific person. Let me just say that again. So the way I think about it is, first you have to decide, okay, when somebody says, what should I get? You've got to put them into a little bit of a category, right? You've got to ask a bit about them and their lifestyle and a few other things. And once you've decided which category they fit in, then there probably is one or two or three best products for them, but they will not be the same as what somebody else might need. So, you know, there's lots of well-meaning social workers and healthcare providers and things that say, well, we heard that company X is the best, but that's probably not quite the right way to think about it. And I'll try and give you the tools today to think about it a bit differently. One of the problems is there's a big shortage of objective guidance. While there's lots on the internet, it's mostly material that's written by the companies that sell them the products, or that's written with the idea of selling particular products. So it's often not terribly objective, and that's a bit frustrating. We have a different approach. We're independent, we're objective, we're a public benefit corporation, which has a mission you can see here. This particular piece of work we're discussing has no sponsorship, no sponsored content, no ads. You might well ask how we sustain it. It's sustained by a small group of people like me who think of this as kind of a philanthropic hobby project, I guess. So that's kind of important. Unlike everything else you'll see, this is not designed to sell you any particular thing. The team that we put together initially was intentionally multidisciplinary. We put together an advisory panel with all sorts of different types of expertise. We draw heavily on our community of longevity explorers, who are people very much like you probably, with an interest in getting involved in this sort of stuff. I did the sort of lead work, which is, I guess, why I get the pleasure of talking to you. I have a technical background originally, and then I've been an entrepreneur for quite a long time. And what's different to most of the other stuff that you see is that we actually go out and get the products. We used to buy them all. Now we sometimes ask to borrow them, and we try them out. And this is actually a picture of me wearing a bunch of them. and we typically get the products, we wear them around for a week or two, we try them out every day, we call for help every day in various different places, and we've got a list of things we think are differentiating factors between different products. So we put them through a little set of tests, and then we write up the results, and you can read the reviews of them on the Tech Enhanced Life website, actually. Okay, that's the introduction, and that's kind of my why you should be, why what I'm telling you might be worth listening to story. Let's talk about the bigger picture of calling for help. Most of this is going to be about medical alerts, but I think it's really important to realize that there are some very interesting emerging trends that are relevant to calling for help. Probably most of you know about Alexa and other voice type products, and now emerging artificial intelligence ideas, AI like ChatGPT and things built on that. Lots of new ones under development. And what's interesting about some of these things is that you can say to them, hey, whatever, in this case, Alexa, hey, something or other, please call my daughter. And it will, if you set it up correctly, it will call them. You can even purchase an add-on service that lets them call an emergency responder, very similar to a medical alert. So that's kind of a completely different modality to a button that you press. It's got some issues at the moment, which I'm happy to talk more about in questions. But, just to mention one simple one, it only works when you're nearby the thing you can talk to. So that's a bit of a limitation. But I think as AI becomes more powerful in the next 2 or 3 years, these capabilities will just become more important. So that's the first emerging trend. The second emerging trend is that it used to be that age tech and medical alerts were its own little universe of rather ugly, unexciting products, very non-aspirational. And there's still a lot of that around, but the world of consumer electronics, like Apple Watches and things, has increasingly started to converge and meet some of the needs we're talking about, like calling for help. And so I think actually that's extremely important. And when I start to talk about medical alerts, in my mind, you can use a smartwatch as a type of medical alert, although it has some differences. So I'll be including them as one of the subcategories. And I think the really interesting aspect is, while some of the watches in this picture don't look so glamorous, some consumer electronics smartwatches are kind of aspirational and cool and do lots of other things like measure your steps. And so for the first time, instead of having to get a kind of stigmatizing, ugly medical alert, you can potentially get a cool thing that's just like your kids have, except it also works as a medical alert. So this is a trend that I think is pretty important and will just become more important as time passes. Okay, let's drill down into the medical alerts, which emergency response systems, medical alerts, those are the same. They mean the same thing in my mind. So I think the way I look at it is there are different flavors of these products. And typically, once you decide what sort of person someone is, they're most suited for a particular flavor. And I'm going to talk about the flavors. I'm not really going to spend time talking about specific brands, although if you've got questions, you're welcome to ask them. But I am going to help you understand how, when you see an advertisement, how you can decide which flavor or which bucket of product it fits in. And then we'll be talking about how to match you with a particular flavor. So I'm now going to run through a few different categories of product. This one is the original old ugly version, which still is sold by lots of companies. And I call it an at-home wearable. And what that means is it's got a thing you wear around your neck, a pendant, and you can see that in the picture, the little white thing on the black string that's down near the quarter in the bottom middle of the picture. You wear that around your neck. And It has what's called a base station, which is the white box of electronics with the big red help button on it. And that base station has to go somewhere in your house. And the pendant, when you press the button, sends a signal to that base station, which then calls the call center. And it's got several important characteristics. First of all, the wearable can be quite small, and that has to do with the technology inside it. It can be, in fact, smaller than some of the other more powerful products we'll see later on. So that's a good thing. And it can have a battery that lasts for a long time. However, it really only works when you're within a certain distance of that base station. So a good way to think about it is it works at home. It might work in the garden, depending on how big your house is, but it definitely does not work when you go to the grocery store or, for a walk. So that's category one. Category two came along probably a decade or so ago now, and it does away with the base station. It just has one piece. So there are three separate products in this picture. Each one is its own separate product. And it really what it is a pendant that you wear around your neck with a button. And it's quite a lot bigger than the at-home ones I just showed you, bigger and heavier, although they've got much better over the last few years. The really important thing about it is it can go more or less anywhere. In other words, it works at home probably. I'll explain what I mean by probably in a minute. And it probably works when you go to the park or the grocery store. The key thing that determines whether it works or not is it needs to be in range of some sort. It needs to be able to receive a cell signal. So if your cell phone doesn't work in your house, this won't either. Or if you like to go for a walk in the wilderness somewhere miles away from anything where there's no cell reception, well, this won't work there either. But in most places you go, in most people's houses, in most of the rooms, and in most shopping centers and parks and things, everywhere you can get a cell signal, this will work. So that's kind of, it broadens out the applicability quite a lot. And it comes with quite a lot of extra features, like it has some GPS built in, which means the call center knows where you are. So if you fall and hurt yourself, you don't have to be able to say, I'm at the corner of Jones Street and, Mission Drive. It knows where you are and it can send help. So that's a plus. However, if you look at it, it's still kind of big and ugly. And that's something that, people see as a negative, although often that's offset by the positive of being able to call for help. Then we come to the smartwatches, which I kind of touched on a bit. And the big thing with these, the benefit is potentially, for some people, they feel like they're much more stylish and much less stigmatizing. Some people don't like them, and that's fine, but some people do. So that's a really important detail, because one of the key aspects of this type of product is a lot of people get them and then don't wear them. And if you think about it, if you've got it and it's sitting in your bedside table when you fall, it's not going to help you much. So almost the most important thing is, does it look like something you would wear? There's a few other things about these products. Quite a lot of them have extra features that some people like counting steps and things. However, they're not quite as easy to use. Well, some of them are not at all easy to use compared to a simple pendant with a button, and none of them are as easy to use. So if you've got someone who's starting to have some cognition issues, or maybe has very significant arthritis and has trouble finding the right piece to the right small button to press on the watch, those are all kind of negative aspects. But for healthy, cognitively fit people who are used to things like watches and don't have a problem figuring out what button to press, there's some benefits. Until recently, these products did not have, except for the Apple Watch, most of these other products until recently did not have fall detection, which I'll talk about in a minute. But in the last 12 months, most of them now do. And so this is, so that's good, because that's a desirable feature. And it makes this category of product much more powerful than it used to be. I see an interesting question there, but I'll come back to it. Anyway, so to keep going through the categories, sometimes when we talk to people, they say, you know, I've got a cell phone and I carry it everywhere. And actually, if I need help, I'm just going to call my daughter or I'm going to call 911. And that's okay. That's certainly a scenario, right? That's not quite as perfect, but some people don't need perfect. And the reason it's not quite as perfect is you have to get the cell phone. It's not attached to you necessarily. You have to find the app. You have to make the call. So, if you fell and hit your head, you're not going to be doing all those things. So it's maybe not so perfect, but some people think it's a perfectly acceptable approach. It does not have fall detection, but by listing the pluses and minuses, I'm trying to give you a flavor of the trade-offs rather than say any one of these is better than the others. Because as I said at the beginning, I think for different people, different ones are suitable. On the right, there's a picture of a sort of brooch, and well, what do you call it? A piece of jewelry, a pendant jewelry thing. And this is an interesting kind of niche. The way this works is that piece of jewelry, the blue stone inside the silver surrounding on the right, it's a pendant that you can press like those ones I showed you before. So if you press, I think it's the blue bit that you press, or maybe there's a button behind, I forget. But anyway, you press that when you need to summon help. And the way this works is it sends a signal to your phone, and then your phone calls for help. So you have to have both the phone and that pendant with you, which is maybe for some people not as simple as just having a pendant by itself, but it's much more attractive, some people think. So that's an interesting little twist. Okay, those are the main categories. There's lots of little subcategories and things that I'm not going to bore you with. If you've got specific questions later, you're welcome to ask them. Wow, I'm getting some great questions. I'm just going to keep going a little bit more, but I promise I'm going to get to those. Okay, I want to talk on about a few of the key things that you have to decide. There's not right answers to these. The first question is about who will respond. In other words, when you press that button, there's a few different things that could happen. It could call 911. That's how an Apple Watch works. But if you want to call it because you got lost on the freeway or because you had a breakdown or some other reason like that, it's not really 911 you want to call. Or it could call what's called a call center responder. And in that case, that's a person, not 911, but a person that's trained to talk to you and figure out what's wrong and then either call 911 for you or give you advice or call someone else, or they've got a range of things they can do. Or when you press the button, you could have it call your daughter. And that might be good because maybe you don't want to be bothering the responder or 911, but what if your daughter's not there? What if she doesn't know what to do? So there's pluses and minuses of all these things, right? This is just a bit of a more elaborate explanation of all that I'm perhaps not going to dwell on, but there's pluses and minuses. The traditional industry has it set up so that when you press the button, it calls a call center. The call center is able to do triage, and if necessary, they call 911. That's the traditional approach. I think it might be maybe the best in terms of perfection, but it comes at a cost. There's a fee, a monthly fee for that. Whereas with something like the Apple Watch, which calls 911 directly, it doesn't have a monthly fee. So cost comes into it. Some people really like the idea of just calling their neighbor or their daughter. I think that's a personal choice, but you can certainly think of examples where something might fall through the cracks if you set it up like that. So this is one of those things where you really have to decide what you care about most. Do you want the most perfect performance? It always calls help of the right sort when you want it. Do you care about cost most? Do you care about speed of response, which is another thing that varies across these different different categories? There's sort of a list. You just have to figure out what you care about most. So that's the first thing to decide. Do you want a monitored alert system where it calls a responder, or an unmonitored alert system where it just goes straight to 911 or calls a friend? Then you have to decide whether you're okay with one that only works at home, like those, like the first ones I showed you, which don't work when you leave the house, or do you have a lifestyle where you're often going out and about and you'd like to make sure it covers you? I found most people that come to these sort of calls really would be better off with the out and about version. But if you have someone who never leaves their house and is very frail, then they don't need that. And then you have to decide on the form factor, what it looks like and where you wear it. And so you can see on this, there's lots of different possibilities. There's the smartwatch, there's the small pendant, there's the big pendant, there's a thing that you can wear on your belt. Some of these pictures are out of date, old products that don't exist anymore, but there's newer ones that do the same thing. So you have to say to yourself, well, what would I realistically wear? The next thing you have to decide is, do you want something that automatically detects when you fall or not? Let me talk you through that. On the left, an example of a conventional pendant without fall detection. So what that means is, imagine you fall over and you break your hip and you're lying there. Nothing happens unless you physically press that button. That's the one on the left. That's probably okay if you're, on the ball. If you have a heart attack or a stroke and you fall, you probably aren't going to be pressing the button and then nothing happens. That's the one on the left. That's the original old-fashioned idea that a lot of people consider is a bit outdated. On the right is the one that automatically detects falls. Most products, by the way, you can have either a fall detection one or a not fall detection one. So usually this is like an extra choice. You just added on that capability. So the one on the right, you fall and you break your hip and it detects that fall ideally. They're not perfect, of course, but at least some of the time, hopefully most of the time, it detects the fall. And when it detects the fall, the good ones speak to you. A voice comes out of them and says, Mrs. Smith, we see that you fell. Do you want us to call for help? And if you didn't really fall, if you just stumbled or sat down heavily or something, then you either press a button to cancel the call for help or you talk to it, depending on the product, and say, no, it's okay, I'm all right. But if you don't respond, it will call automatically for help. So this is kind of powerful in certain situations. If you have a stroke, you fall or you hit your head, in any of those situations, this will, assuming it works as designed, it will call for help without you having to do anything. I personally think this auto fall detection is kind of a good feature. One of the questions, though, that I got is, what about overly sensitive fall detectors? What if person has removed their hearing aids and can't hear the device calling them? Yes. Well, that's Susan. Thank you, Susan. That's a very good question. I think you sort of have to make a trade-off. Well, first of all, you want to get, ideally, you'd get the product with the most perfect fall detection, but unfortunately, it's very hard to decide which one has the most perfect fall detection because all the companies claim theirs is the best, and they refuse to share any actual data on the topic. So I don't personally know which is the best, and I don't believe anyone else does either. But it's sort of a trade-off, right? like I have an Apple Watch and it has fall detection turned on, and every now and again it starts buzzing and says, we detected a fall. Do you want me to do anything? And I sort of press the button to cancel it. I don't find that a big challenge. But for some people, you might. On the other hand, is it okay to not have anything notice when you have a stroke and fall over? You just have to make that judgment call depending on what scenario you're most worried about. While I'm on these questions, someone else said, what about in the shower? Pretty much all these products are water resistant and work in the shower. The companies recommend you keep them on in the shower. A lot of people don't, but if you're worried about falling in the shower, then you just need to get one that's water resistant, at least to the level of a shower, which is almost all of them, but it's you can check when you look at them, and then you're supposed to wear it in the shower. Okay, let's see what else I got here. Yes, this is kind of an important one. It's often underappreciated. All these products have a battery involved of some sort, independent typically, and they require different frequencies of charging with, as you might expect, the best ones need to be charged more often than the less good ones. If you're just fine charging something every night, like if you already charge your phone and your watch and just one more thing to charge every night, then this is probably not a big deal for you. But some people have a real problem with that. They can't handle the plugs, or they forget, or whatever. And so some of the products, for example, the one on the right, the most primitive, simple one without fall detection, that comes with a battery in it that you only have to change annually. I think there might even be some where it's 18 months. So that's the sort of thing where someone else can make a note that they have to come by once a year and change your battery. So the question of which battery charging regimen is acceptable for a given person, that's a pretty important detail, actually. Burke says, one of your pictures says no location. How can that be? Well, Burke, that can be because for the device to know where you are, it has to have certain technology in it, typically GPS, but there are some other ones too. And that particular product in that picture does not have that technology in it. So it doesn't really know where you are. Actually, that exact product knows where you are roughly, but not at all precisely, using a different technology. And so the idea with that is you need to tell a provider where you are when you press the button. Okay, how to select an actual product. So a good way to think about this, if you wanted to buy something after this talk, you would go back through the talk and you'd try and decide for yourself of all these trade-offs, which ones you care about. And then you'd have like a checklist, right? And then you have the job of winnowing through various products. We've done a lot of stuff on our website where we've tried to help people make that decision. So I'd encourage you to go look there. And the way we used to have a complicated selection tool where you could put in various features you wanted, and it would spit out some specific products you could, that we thought were good. We've discontinued that because a lot of people said it was too complicated, and anyway, it was a lot of work to keep up, and we just, since it's all pro bono, we do it out of love. We just decided we didn't want to do that anymore. But most people didn't really want to use the selection tool anyway. I kept getting emails that said, that's all very interesting, Richard. You might be sitting there thinking this too, but just tell me what to buy. So we actually have a section on our website that says, just tell me what to buy, and about medical alerts. And the way we think about it is we ask you to pick a persona that is best describing the person that you are, or the person that you're buying this for. There's 5 of those personas. You can see them here: go, slow go, no go, need some care, 24/7 care. And there's a description of exactly what each of these is on our website. I won't go through it right now. But once you've decided that a person fits one of those categories, then the accompanying article tells you which flavors most people find are best for that type of person. So that's a way to narrow things down pretty quickly. There's a lot of stuff on the website, and I'm happy to talk more in questions because I'll be finished with this in a minute. But you know, there's product reviews, there's specific recommendations at the link that's on this slide that I'm sure will be in the blog post. There's an article called "Just Tell Me What to Buy" somewhere in this section of the Tech Enhanced Life website also. That's kind of the overview. I wanted to leave lots and lots of time for questions. So I'm just going to look at the questions in the chat and address them, and then maybe we can open it all up for anyone who wants to speak. So first question, Burke says, it's been a while since someone took over Lifeline from Philips. What is the track record of the new company? Yes. Well, I try not to be too, so this video is going to be public, so I try not to be too specific about specific companies in public. But what I can say is that when Philips owned Lifeline, they sold a number of medical alerts that regularly got to the top of our list of great ones in all sorts of ways. Those ones we liked a lot were all discontinued when they sold Lifeline to the new owner. They now have some new versions. Let's just say none of them got to the top of any of our rankings, none of the new ones. So when we make a list of vendors we think are, you know, good ones to start with, Philips usually isn't on the list anymore, which is a shame. It's not really Philips, of course. It's Lifeline belonging to another company. It says on our website who bought it, but I've forgotten right this second. And then Frank points out that a village volunteer can help as a tech tutor to set up your smartwatch, which isn't a question, but that's a great point. So I'll just leave that where it is. Is there any place one can go to see and feel a range of these devices? Not that I know of, Burke, no. Except, of course, the Apple Store, if you like the idea of a smartwatch. Elaine says, you might remind people that pendants sit in a cradle, nightly, normally, or optimum use to charge. Also, fall detection is always an additional charge along with monthly fee. Yes, those are great points. Thank you, Elaine. Sorry, I didn't mention both those things. I'll just elaborate on that, actually. The bit about the pendant sitting in the cradle, on the one hand, that's in a way good in that it's sort of happily charging while you're asleep. On the other hand, if you get out of bed and go to the bathroom and fall over, you probably didn't remember to put your pendant on in the meantime. So again, you got to think about what problem you're trying to solve. You know, if you sleep with a spouse, maybe you're not too worried about needing a pendant on the way to the bathroom. If you worry about that, maybe you'd be better off with a smartwatch that you wear while you're asleep. How complicated is an Apple smartwatch to learn for those of us who might be technology challenged? Elaine, thank you. That's a good question. You know, that's one of those questions that, so complicated means different things to different people, doesn't it? That's why I'm sounding a bit, I'm thinking about how to best answer that. But I'll tell you what I think about this. There's actually a whole spectrum of different smartwatches designed to work as medical alerts. And I'll show you just some examples in one of my pictures. Yeah, these are all different smartwatches, of which only one is an Apple Watch, which is the top left. There's more now too. And the Apple Watch is the most sophisticated. I personally like it. I have one, but it does have some complexity involved. And some people think it's too complicated for them. Some of these other watches are intentionally designed for, quote, older adults. And the main thing that means, apart from larger fonts and things like that, is that they've greatly reduced the complexity. So they don't have nearly as many extra capabilities. You know, they might track steps and call for help, and that's about all. And most of them are pretty simple, actually. So I think the first step is to decide if you like the idea of the smartwatch versus the pendant. And if you like the idea of the smartwatch, maybe go to the Apple store and get a little tutorial on the Apple Watch. And if it just seems bewildering, then forget that. But if it's bewildering, then maybe one of these simpler ones might be a good solution. Having said all that, none of them is as simple as a pendant where you press the button. If you want the absolute simplest, that's the answer. Frank said, okay, a few more questions. How do you charge an Apple Watch? Okay, an Apple Watch, you charge by just popping it on a little kind of charging cradle thing. For those of you who have a smartphone, it's somewhat similar to that. In terms of how much do smartwatches cost to buy and use, I think you should go look at the website for a price. That's not really my job to tell you a price. But one thing that's kind of interesting is, people say, well, an Apple Watch is expensive. And in terms of the dollars to buy it, it does seem expensive to people. But once you bought it, there's not necessarily any monthly fee after that. Whereas if you buy one of these medical alerts, there usually is a monthly fee. And in one of our comparison articles, I decided that what I would care about is the 2-year total cost of ownership, right? So for the Apple Watch, it was how much you'd have to pay to buy it, and that was it. And for the medical alert, it was 24 times the monthly fee. And actually, when I did that analysis a few years ago, the Apple Watch was actually cheaper over 2 years than the medical alerts. So I guess that's something to just bear in mind. Could you say some of the names of these smartwatches? There's an article on our website in the section I referred to at the end, which is called something like Smartwatches as Medical Alerts. And we keep it up to date. And it identifies by name the ones that we think are worth looking at and that we've reviewed. And there are links to detailed reviews we've done. And we keep that up to date. And I'd rather you go there rather than me start saying names, because 2 years from now, when someone finds this video, I'd rather they don't suddenly think I'm recommending a product which, maybe has gone away or I don't like anymore. There's maybe 3 or 4 of them that we thought were pretty good. Frank, afterwards, if you want to follow up, I can give you some links to send to people with that, where they can learn the answers to that.
Great.
Why can't a watch have a button like a pendant? Too small? Actually, well, the watches do have a button. It's just a very small button on the side. And also, something like an Apple Watch has multiple buttons. So you have to remember which the right button is. Some of the simpler smartwatches designed specifically for older adults try to just have one button. But it's not like a big, huge button you can't miss like it is on a pendant. I got to the end of the chat. Feel free to put in more questions. But Frank, I don't know if you'd like to ask anyone to speak if they want to speak.
Sure. Maybe you can stop sharing and we can just have you as the spotlight.
That'd be great. Give me a second.
And then if you'd like to ask a question, you can just simply unmute yourself and then go ahead and ask your question directly to Richard. And I'll join you here. So while people are figuring out their question, I'll say that when we send out the recording, we'll send out this to everybody. I will also put in the email to you some of the links that Richard has talked about, so you don't have to worry about writing those down. So Richard, would you say that the first thing to do would be to go to the website and try to figure out the persona, and then go from there? Would that be your advice if someone is just starting out thinking about this?
It's not a bad approach. I've found that there's 2 types of people, broadly speaking, that ask me about these products. One type just sort of wants to be told the answer, and yes, for them, decide which persona you are, follow the trail of what it recommends, and that'll get you to a choice of just a small number. But other people want to really understand every detail and all that stuff, and for those, I'd listen to this talk again, try and make some decisions about all the factors that I said were important, and maybe then go to the personas.
Great. Okay.
Susan, you have your hand up. Susan Davis.
Hello.
Yes,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Yes, we
Okay,
can.
yes. Okay.
Okay. Shall I
I've
speak?
heard about Alexa systems or similar kinds of devices that are set up so that they actually alert someone if the person isn't active at their usual time or something like that. Or I mean, I guess they have to make the whole house a smart house to know if they went and turned on the coffee machine in the morning, or you know what I mean? Can you talk a little bit more about those kinds of systems?
Yes. So Alexa typically doesn't do that all by itself, but it sometimes can be connected to other things so that together as an overall system, you can accomplish that. And there's actually a number of different vendors that have tried to bring to market systems that kind of turn your house into an intelligent house that kind of keeps an eye on you or cares for you or whatever. I've always thought that's a really interesting idea. Most of them haven't succeeded very well. Not so much because they don't work, but because no one seems to want to pay for them. I don't know that I don't know that I have an opinion which exact one you would buy if you're interested, but the general idea is you have all these sensors that notice things like how often you open the fridge and, how long you stay in bed and how many times you go to the bathroom and things like that. And for the good ones, you can have some control over what it's allowed to measure and what it's not. So you can make sure it's not recording stuff you don't want. They don't typically involve cameras and stuff. They're more like motion sensors. And up until recently, one of their weaknesses has been that they haven't really been that intelligent. So they mostly work well when your kid is willing to sit at work watching a screen with all these things that say, last night mum went to the bathroom 5 times, but she also went to the fridge 27 times, and is that okay? And most people aren't interested in that level of, most kids aren't interested in watching that much and figuring out what it means, and most older adults don't want their kids looking at all that. What's really needed is an artificial intelligence that can look at all that and separate out routine activities from things that might be problematic, and somehow have an intelligent way to either tell you or tell your kid or whatever it is you want it to do. I think those things are possible. I know several companies working on them. You might be able to buy something more or less like that right now, maybe, but I'm sure that you could in a few years. The only bad bit is people don't seem to want to pay for all that. So I'm not sure that'll ever happen, but it definitely could.
I'm Patricia, and I'd like to ask a question, and I don't know, do I mute or unmute myself?
You're good. Just
You're
talk.
good
We
to
can
go,
hear you.
Patricia.
Okay. Am I jumping the line here, or?
After you, we'll go to Luis, but go ahead, Patricia.
Okay. I've been told by some people who already have a smartwatch that you need to have it snug to your wrist, or it will not function properly.
When you say function properly, what do you mean by that?
Well, I guess if you need to press a button in order to have help, and like sometimes I wear my watch loose, and so I can pull it up or down on my wrist. And what they were saying is that when you have the watch, it should be in one place and stay in one place rather than be moving around.
I see.
I don't know what but they must have tested it somehow, or.
Yeah, let me unpack that for you. So the watch can do multiple things, right? One thing it can do is if you want to call for help, there's a button that you can press. And that does not require anything special about how tightly it's attached to your wrist or anything like that. If you press the button, it'll call for help. It's that simple. That's the first capability. The second capability, though, is that it automatically detects you fell. And with all these products, that functionality is a bit dependent on how you wear the product. And it could well be that with the watch, it works. It's more perfect at detecting if you fell, if it's attached snugly to your wrist. That's possible. On the other hand, you know, it's all a question of degree, right? It will still probably work some of the time. And then the third thing is, some of these smartwatches have other features like counting your steps or measuring your blood oxygenation and things like that. And
yeah.
some of those extra features do work better if it's snugly attached to you.
Okay, yeah, all right, so that, it makes sense.
May I,
Yes,
may I speak
Luis.
now?
yeah,
Yeah, please.
all right.
Hello, I have an Apple Watch and it's pretty good. However, some time ago, it started to act like crazy. The screen started to show all kinds of strange things, and it wasn't useful anymore. So I called Apple to know how to take care of that, and I was told to power off and then to reset it. Now, to power off, I had to press and keep pressing on the side button. However, when I did that, it sounded an alarm. It called 911 and all of my children. And even though later I corrected the problem, it kept alerting all my relatives for many days until it stopped doing that. So I realized that by pressing the side button, it does two different things. One, it can power it off, or the other is called the SOS. And the solution, I was told, is to go to settings and to disable the feature that will call an alarm when you press the side button. But if I do that, then I don't have any longer the capability to send an alarm when I really need it.
Luis, that sounds like a perfect question for the village tech volunteer. Are you a member of one of the villages?
I'm a member of the West End village.
I recommend you talk to the tech volunteer. I think that's beyond the scope of what I can help you with over Zoom today, but I bet you somebody could help you.
Thank you.
Great. Do
I
we have
see a couple
other,
of, yeah, go ahead, Frank, sorry.
wonder if we had other questions for people that they wanted to ask? If so, you can just unmute and then ask your question.
Frank, this is Crystal.
Uh-huh.
Is there any place in our area that has all of these things or some of these things in stock that we can come in and review them and get a better understanding?
I don't know of any, but I saw the question earlier in the chat, and I think it's a great idea. Particularly, you know, we're going to have a village to village uh, conference in October. That may be a place. The mayor has a holiday party every year. I think we ought to get invite the companies to come and have it be more than just food and dancing, but actually, you know, address some of these issues where people can actually see the product, feel the product, and get their needs met. So I want to go back and talk to my colleagues at other villages and see if we can't figure out a good venue where everyone could actually try out some of these products. I can't imagine that the companies wouldn't want, you know, a group of people to actually touch and feel and see how things work and be able to talk to you about those.
Thank
So
you
I'll
in
work on that.
advance. Thank you.
If you decide to do that, Frank, I'll be happy to give you a short list of who you should invite.
Great, thank you. I will.
You
Definitely.
know, there's a subtle dimension about that most people don't realize. The companies that you buy these products from mostly don't make them themselves. And so you can find identical products with different names sold by all the different medical alert companies. And so that's kind of a bit of a complexity to it all. That, for example, means that when you ask a company to come, you've got to decide whether you want to ask the people that actually make the product or one of the channels that are selling it.
Great. Thank you for that, Richard.
I see an interesting
Other
question in the
questions?
chat that I wouldn't mind handling. Can I tackle that?
Absolutely.
So Elaine says, would you touch on lockbox feature that some companies offer? And that's pretty interesting. And I didn't talk about it at all, but perhaps I should. So here's what the issue is. Suppose you call for help using any one of these products, and suppose, you know, something bad happened to you. You're lying on the floor with, you know, with some injury. What you want is for the fire department to come and rescue you, right? That's what you want. And that's how these products are designed. But imagine you're lying inside and, you know, in the second floor bathroom, and the fire department comes to the front door. You know, what's going to happen? And what's going to happen is that unless there's some solution you've thought of in advance, the fire department will knock and ring and then might break the door down. That's what they do, not infrequently, if they're convinced you're in there in emergency. So that's probably better than lying there without anyone helping you. But people get upset when their front door gets broken down by the fire department. So the solution to that the industry has come up with is the idea that you have a so-called lockbox, which is a little metal box with a combination that is attached to the wall next to your front door, and in it is your front door key. Or an alternative is you could have an electronic lock, of course. And in both cases, the idea is that you tell the medical alert company responder the combination code, so that when they call the fire department, they say, you need to go rescue Mrs. Smith. She lives at 27 Flower Drive, and the combination code to her lockbox is blah, 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 right? That's what they recommend. And there's definite reasons why that might be a good idea in some circumstances. Of course, you have to ask yourself whether you're comfortable with the idea that there's a key sitting in a little metal box outside the front door that probably someone could, well, you can imagine what could happen, since this is going to be I'm not sure, we might not have this bit in the live video. I guess what I was going to say is you could imagine that someone might break in if they had that. But anyway, it is definitely something to think about how will someone get in your house if you're inside and you call for help. Any other questions? Okay, here's one. My responder has information on where a key is hid or other ways to get in, e.g. window above front door is not locked. Yep. Right, that's probably a great way to do it. These are actually other reasons why having a responder rather than just calling 911 might be a good idea, right? Because 911 won't know any of those things.
I see, Gloria, you have your hand up. You can go ahead and unmute and then ask your question.
Yeah, I believe that I'm in Montgomery County, Maryland, and I believe the fire department there's a standard key for those who have registered, and they carry that key on their respond vehicles.
Okay, that's great. I don't think all counties have that, but that sounds like a good idea, doesn't it?
Any other questions or comments that people have? Hey,
Well,
well,
if I may, I just would like to say that this was very informative, and I'm very happy that I've joined the Zoom in order to see what Richard Caro had to tell us about that. Because it's already, you've already looked into a lot of things that I didn't know where I was going to start. So thank you very much for the idea. And thank you to Frank as well. And I'm looking forward to go further into that. And I'm glad to hear that maybe you'll have a meeting in October to further all this. The tech world of today is rather complicated. And so therefore there's a lot of pluses and minuses. So thank you for the presentation.
Great. Thanks very much. You're welcome.
Frank, I thank you very much. And Mr. Caro, I thank you also.
Great. Thank you
welcome.
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
I see
And-
Gloria has her hand up there. Do we want to ask?
I think it was from
Oh,
previously.
before. Got it.
No, it's something new.
Oh, okay.
Richard, I for a long time had been on your mailing list, your email list. And I just realized I haven't heard from you all in a long, long time. Are you no longer sending information to people?
No, we definitely are. At least once a month, we send out something.
Oh.
And that probably means you're not on the list anymore, or unless it's getting lost in your spam. If you want to maybe you can always make sure you're signed up yourself, of course, but if you want to send an email somehow to me via Frank or something, I don't know if we can do that, Frank, but I'd be happy to make sure you're on the list.
Sure. I'll put my email in the chat, and you can certainly email me, Gloria, and I'll put you in touch with Richard. And with that, I want to just thank Richard so much for his time and energy putting together this presentation for us. I think it was very, very helpful, and I really appreciate it. And again, I will be sending out a recording of this along with some of the links that were mentioned so that you can proceed and get more information. And also, we will be following up with a couple of emails just asking, the first one be a simple one around, how'd you find this talk? Meaning, how useful was it to you? What did you like about it and whatnot? And then later we'll be following up to find out specific actions that you may take in order to get the medical alert device that works for you. We want to find that information out. So just two emails from us. The last thing I want to say is that the recording will also be available on our website at cwpv.org. And if you ever have any input into future presentations of this nature, educational presentations that we can do, please let me know. I'm more than open to addressing other topics of concern, particularly when it involves emergency preparedness. So again, that's cwpv.org, and you can reach me at frank@cwpv.org. Thanks so much, everyone, and have a great night.
Well, thank you. That was very helpful. It has started me to think about having one, actually. I never thought of it before. So very informative.
Great. Thank you so much. Great.
Thanks
so much.
everybody.
Good night.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, Jim.